Joining us now, Tre Lovell, an entertainment attorney from LA. I had to read that twice. I thought maybe we had combined two different major news stories, but was that something they were actually considering?
That is a surprise to me. That's just so out of there, has nothing to do with the trial. There's a lot of issues that the government has to deal with at the same time, being able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So I was surprised they were worried about that and want to have an instruction to that effect, but it certainly has nothing to do with the trial and would never come in.
Is that a sign of desperation that they would even consider throwing that out there?
I think the prosecution is concerned, that this is a tough case. It's an uphill battle. They're trying to prove racketeering and sex trafficking based on personal relationships that lasted a long time with women who admittedly, loved Combs. So if you look at the proposed jury instructions, the modifications, as well as, this instruction, they're taking everything they can, every shot to make sure that things fall in their favor and not in the defense's favor.
So I mentioned the defense did not call any witnesses. Why would they do that?
So the only reason not to call witnesses is if you absolutely believe you have reasonable doubt. And you don't want to do anything to detract from that, to disturb that, including calling your own favorable witnesses. So when the defense did that, that shows me that they have utmost confidence, that they have poked enough holes in the prosecution's case through all of these witnesses. Have they been able to establish reasonable doubt and don't want to take a chance that one of their own witnesses could get turned around, have bad testimony, and somehow bolster the government's position?
Diddy did not testify. That's his choice. You think that was the right call?
Absolutely. Diddy testifying would have been horrible, because this is a RICO case, which means prior bad acts can come up in cross-examination. If he was subject to cross-examination, not only would he be talking about the indictment charges, but other bad acts as well that haven't come up, but he can be subject to cross-examination. And obviously his lifestyle, the last 2 or 3 decades are filled with bad acts. So it really was a no-brainer. There was no good that can come out of Diddy testifying. And only bad. So I'm not surprised at all that they won't let him testify.
Tre, you and I have talked about some of the criticism that the prosecution overreached, overcharged in this case. Is that still a risk for them with this jury in trying to find guilt?
It really is. When the indictments first came out, it was a bombshell. And you had these 60 civil suits, which means there's 60 plus victims out there. I was expecting a streamline of victims to be in this criminal case, but we only have 2 girlfriends and then 2 people that work for him. And so such a low number of actual victims, which really are the meat of testifying in these RICO cases like this, was surprising. So it seems like they took, bedroom activity, a personal lifestyle, and are trying to build a major racketeering case around it. And I just thought once I saw the case, it seemed like it was severely overcharged.
So would your prediction be they're going to have a tough time to convict on this one?
Yes, my prediction is that they're going to have a tough time to convict, certainly on the racketeering charges, on the sex trafficking charges. They may have an easier time on the prostitution charges. Because it's pretty clear that sex workers were flown from one part of the country to the other to participate in sex, which is transportation to engage in prostitution. But it's going to come down to whether or not the sex worker is what is really the definition, which is legal, or they were prostitutes, which is illegal. But with respect to racketeering and sex trafficking, yeah, I think that's an uphill battle.
If he is found guilty on that charge you just mentioned, what's the penalty? What might he face?
So transportation to engage in prostitution, I think, is a maximum of 10 years. And if it's his first conviction, he may be looking at 2 or 3 years.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll see what the jury has to say. Tre Lovell, thank you.